There's a quote here which comes from a thing called the Little Black Book of Innovation, and it tries to describe in a lot of ways what Resolute's trying to do, which is to innovate in a whole lot of areas of its business, not because it's cool or groovy or the latest thing, but because it actually has a positive impact on the business, because it improves safety, health, environmental, and financial outcomes. And our approach to energy generation, and I'm going to talk about our flagship mine in Syama in Mali in that respect, is a reflection of that. A little bit of background. Syama, as I mentioned, is in Mali. Mali's in West Africa. I'll show you on a map later exactly where it is in West Africa. But it is our most significant asset. It's an asset that's capable of producing about 300,000 ounces per annum, and it will do close to that amount this year. It's got a very long mine life by gold mining standards. It's been operating, in fact, since 1990, since its original discovery by BHP. And we see another 15 to 20 years of mine life. So in examining energy options for that asset, we have the benefit of a long-term view. And obviously that's not something that every miner has. It comprises both an underground mine and a series of open pit mines. We have two separate processing plants that deal with both oxide and sulphide ore, all of which creates a reasonably substantial energy demand. The new underground mine, which we're just putting in place, in and of itself generates another 6 megawatts of additional energy demand over that which we previously had. And that's because we're running very large fans, we're running jumbos, we're running electric loaders, we're also running a vast array of pumps. My colleague who's in the building has been responsible for installing a lot of these because we have to cope with pretty severe wet season in Mali, which is something we're just entering. And the Syama underground mine, some elements of which we see depicted on the slide on my left, will be in and of itself, we think, a hugely innovative enterprise. Not because we're doing anything new, and that's a theme I'll repeat, I suppose, in respect of solar power and our integrated power solutions to Syama, but because we're bringing together a whole lot of technologies at the moment we think they're mature enough to use and applying them right across that line. So in the case of Syama, we are now doing all of our production drilling via automated drill rigs, and an operator in a control room at the surface manages those rigs. We'll shortly be commissioning automated loading and automated trucking from underground. The point is that this mine will be the first in the world to our certain knowledge where the entire production process will be undertaken with machines not operated by humans and exposed to the dangers and the risks that pose on. And that's the quote that I referred to earlier. So where is Syama? Syama's in Africa. I'm sure most of you know where that is. The interesting thing about Syama is that it's remote by anyone's standards. It's remote by Australian standards. We're over 1,000 kilometres from the coast, and we're over, typically those distances I think are in a fast car, in a truck lumbering up the road from Abidjan. It takes a lot longer than that. Every litre of fuel that we use passes along one of those tracks to get to our mine. We use 100,000 litres of fuel per day to run our power station and to obviously fuel mobile equipment in our mines. So it's a really important element of our project here that we try and reduce the dependence on that supply route. We have a 4-month wet season, as I just described, which is just starting now. It'll run through about September. There are periods when those roads aren't great. There are some that are good and there are some that are awful, and some that are impassable at certain times and under certain conditions. And that supply line is what we're dependent on. So for 30 years, trucks have been making their way laboriously from the coast to that mine to ensure that we can keep running. I think the miracle is not that we're looking to amend that system, it's that it's never failed so far. So when we pursue the opportunity for improved power solution, what are we looking for? There's probably 4 things. There's the flexibility to be able to increase and decrease production and increase and decrease our energy demand and production. We want to reduce the capex. So as I noted in Neil's remarks just before that you don't have to build your things. We don't intend to. We are looking pursuing an IPP solution such that the technical, the operating and the capital risk is largely taken by other parties. Speed of implementation is obviously important. The time that we spend between now and the implementation of that solution is time that we're paying for more expensive power than we need. And a big driver for the eventual solution that we arrive at will be very much about speed. And finally, the driver for this is not merely environmental credentials, although I think they're very important. It's that this will supply us, in our opinion, the lowest cost of energy available to us that we could secure based on the available technologies and our particular location and needs. So we will be building an entirely mine-based, off-grid and fully integrated power station. What does that entail? It's really a series of small innovations, not world first, but their combination in our view and their location and their size is in itself, we think, probably unique in the mining sphere. This is something of a technical slide, so bear with me. What it's doing in the black line is showing our site demand. It's around 40 megawatts. It obviously varies seasonally, as I mentioned, during the wet season. It rains a lot. During those periods we have to start up underground pumps that would otherwise be idle, so we need quite a lot of flexibility in ramping up and down power generation to run those pumps. We also have seasonal pumping from the supply rivers that we put into our water storage facilities. As well as that, obviously, you need the usual capacity to be able to deal with cold starts of major plant components, mills, crushers, etc. So our vision for how that demand will be met will be obviously to have a base load source, and in this case we're going to go for medium speed, large HFO units. We will supplement that with solar and with battery technology of up to 5 megawatt hours to give us what we think is close to the optimal solution for our current needs and for the available technology that's at our disposal. The point about this solution, because it's integrated and it's built from scratch to meet our needs, we're also building it in such a way that it be modularised and it can be grown or changed to meet either our changing needs or the changing sources of energy that might become available in the future. So if I were to summarise our approach, it's to obviously generate an integrated power station so that we're not tacking on, if you like, solar to a rather tired old diesel station, which is our current configuration. And that allows a whole lot of efficiencies that otherwise would not be available to us. In each case, the elements of the plants will be fairly standard and repeatable. We'll use the same 10 megawatt Wärtsilä HFO engines, and we'll generate the number of those, we'll install the number of those that we need. Similarly, the solar arrays will be available to be modularised and grown over time should the need arise. The replacement of LFO, diesel with HFO, is probably something that's not so common in Australia. Where we are in Africa, there's a lot of it around because it's effectively a byproduct of refining, and we're surrounded by some of the world's largest oil producers, particularly in East Africa and in the Arabian Peninsula. That material is freely available. It's probably 25 to 30% less cost per unit of energy than diesel. And obviously the trend of moving from diesel to HFO stations in our part of the world has actually been quite consistent, and again, it's not particularly innovative on our part. But there are benefits from that. It'll actually be newer designed engines with lower emissions and lower consumption, so they'll be more efficient as well as using a lower cost fuel. I think the key thing that I want to emphasise is the solutions intended to be integrated and modular so that we can change in time. We have ambitions for this mine that might see it grow further. We might change our energy demand, we might change the energy mix, and we want to be able to manage that scenario. Obviously in doing this, as I mentioned before, we're doing it not merely for the love of new technology or because innovation is cool, but because we think it'll actually make for a better business. So if you look on the left, typically, and I've worked at quite a lot of gold mines in my life, where this is the solution. The original owner has built the power station, comprising a motley collection, often of ageing diesel units. In our case, they are quite old, in some of them very old, and of various sizes. And we run and operate those as best we can as a gold mine, comprised mainly of mining engineers, geologists and metallurgists, which equips us not particularly well-run power stations. Then there are obviously more typical and more current day off-grid power solutions. But what we're moving to is obviously, as I've described, an IPP structured solution, somewhere where someone else is taking all of that construction and technical risk, and where all those technologies are unified in a single plant. And that it'd be modular, scalable, and more commercially appealing, therefore, for us. The graph on the right tries to depict some of the savings that we think we'll make. The bottom one is the most important one, I suppose, from the shareholder's perspective. and that is that we think we can go close to halving our unit cost of energy through this process. And there's a combination, obviously, of various sources. The free energy from the sun, the battery storage, which reduces our spinning reserve, the more efficient use of larger engines, and the use of a different fuel. The spinning reserve is quite an interesting thing, and at this point I start to tax my knowledge on the subject. But clearly, to maintain the capacity to meet the immediate needs of the mine, we will maintain a certain amount of spinning reserves in the generating units at our current diesel station. What we've identified is that with the emergence of much more powerful and much more high capacity batteries, we can store a substantial amount of energy such that a lot of the immediate and even the emergency demands of the mine site can be met from those batteries. And we don't need to run effectively generating engines in reserve. This has quite a substantial effect on cost, and it's one of the more interesting elements of our solution. It also has a lot of benefits in terms of levering and smoothing, as I understand it, the power quality as well, which has always been an issue with the operation of our current facility. Again, I would say, why are we doing this? What's the impact? Why is this innovative? Why is this innovative in respect of our business? It will actually help us with a lot of the things that every miner needs. It needs a continuous source of power to maintain a continuous operation. We need to have less downtime, and the mix of machinery and the reliability of that machinery will ensure that. We obviously need to achieve the kind of fuel savings that we've just depicted before to generate unit cost reductions. Ultimately, and we need enhanced dispatchability so that we don't have to maintain a spinning reserve. We can actually get the power to the parts of the site that we need it at the time that we need it. Ultimately, it'll be about control of our enterprise and about decreased costs. There was an interesting example at Syama last week, and we had big rain events. There was about 50 millimetres fell in about an hour. It's not uncommon in the wet season because it's a very thunderstorm prone area. And what happened is that it was okay because we had a whole lot of engines in the spinning reserve that meant that the pumps kicked in and we were able to ensure that the mine was remained dry. Now, one of the effects of the battery storage will be to dramatically improve that situation such that we can, in fact, apply technologies around weather guidance that tell us when the storms are coming. It tells us to put in the spinning reserve or to kick in the batteries so that power is available to run the pumps. At the moment, we would spend a lot of money in diesel just in case. So there's a lot of stuff that will occur as a consequence of integrating our entire business, both the demand from the mine, the demand from the power from the processing plant, and the available energy sources that we'll have at our disposal. And look, this is a sort of final quote from a somewhat tarnished visionary, but nonetheless it's true. And we see what we're doing at Syama as a step along the road to ultimately being much more solar dependent and much less fuel dependent. And if you remember the observation I made at the start about the distance we have to bring our energy supplies, our fuel into the mine, it's actually a means by which we can slowly and gradually de-risk this business. So while the penetration of solar into our grid might be 30% now, maybe it'll be 50% in 10 years, maybe it'll be 100% in 20 years. But by establishing the sort of structures that we have around the station, we create that capacity for the future. So thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you've gained something from this exposition of what we're trying to do at Syama. All technical questions I'll defer to my colleague at the back of the room. Thank you.